3% of the deal, James Whitmore announced, swirling his drink, goes to anyone here who can translate this contract on the spot. He tossed the document onto the glossy oak table. A few guests leaned closer, recognizing the French text. Most chuckled and leaned back, uninterested in the challenge. James added with a grin, "That's about $800,000 for 5 minutes of brain work. Any takers?" Laughter rippled through the room. This was typical James brash, theatrical, always testing the waters to remind people he ran the current. "You're asking lawyers to show off during brunch?" one guest quipped. "Nah, they charge by the hour," another said. "This room runs on ego, not fluency." Someone in the back snorted. "Maybe the cleaning crew speaks French." The comment drew a few chuckles and some glances toward the corner, where Grace, the live-in housekeeper, was quietly arranging coffee cups. Beside her stood her daughter, Anna, only 6 years old, wearing a plain blue dress and mismatched sneakers. Anna's eyes weren't on the pastries or the chandelier, they were locked on the contract. And then, breaking the quiet, her voice rang out. "I can do it." Heads turned sharply. James arched a brow. "Come again?" "I said I can translate it," Anna repeated, stepping forward, hands folded but her posture steady. Her tone wasn't defiant, but it wasn't timid either. It was confident, precise. A tense pause swallowed the laughter. "Your daughter?" James asked Grace, who rushed over instantly, panic flooding her face. "She's just a kid, sir." She didn't mean to interrupt, but James raised a hand, silencing her. His smirk returned. "All right, let's entertain this moment of curiosity." He waved her over. Page 3, paragraph 2. Anna took the contract. It nearly dwarfed her in size. She scanned it quickly, lips moving in silence, then spoke. "In accordance with Clause 12b," she said clearly, "the second party agrees to maintain full brand representation in all translated marketing material across designated territories for no less than 18 months. The room fell into a strange quiet. Breach of this clause entitles the first party to seek termination of exclusivity and compensation through arbitration under Texas state law, up to 40% of projected damages. When she finished, no one laughed. A French investor stood, stunned. "That's correct. Completely accurate. Even the cadence. C'est incroyable." Another whispered, "That little girl just translated corporate French legalese like it was a bedtime story." The room came alive with murmurs. A few clapped politely. One woman near the back said, "She's extraordinary." Another murmured, "Smarter than my last 2 assistants combined." Meanwhile, James said nothing. He remained standing behind his chair, his face unreadable. And people noticed. The guests who once chuckled now exchanged looks. A few raised eyebrows. The silence from the host became its own noise. "She just made half a room of executives look stupid," one man muttered under his breath. "And he's saying nothing?" Someone else whispered. "Not even a thank you?" "I thought he was a risk taker," another woman said, barely concealing her disdain. "Guess not when the talent comes in sneakers." James's ears burned. He felt the temperature in the room shift, not toward the girl, but toward him. Doubt had entered, and it was spreading quickly. Grace tried to pull Anna back. "Come on, baby. That's enough." But Anna looked up at James, unwavering. "You promised 3%, she said calmly. "Does that still count?" He hesitated. His fingers tightened around the glass in his hand. "You're 6 years old," he said, trying to regain footing. "That wasn't part of the deal," she replied. "If this story moved you, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Like the video if it inspired you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful story." More murmurs. Some guests grinned at her boldness. One even clapped softly. A tall woman in a navy suit said aloud, "Smart and fair." This kid might be the only honest broker in this room. James felt cornered in his own home, his authority slipping like sweat from a brow. "She memorized it," someone said, trying to save him. "No," said the French investor, stepping forward. "She understood it. That's not memory, that's fluency." James still said nothing. Anna handed the contract back and added, "People stop trusting words when they're used for jokes." The line hit like a stone dropped in still water. Sharp, unforgettable. She turned and walked back toward her mother. Grace looked at James once more. Then followed. A slow applause began from a few guests at first, hesitant but genuine. Not for James. For Anna, and James knew it. He sat down slowly, setting the glass aside, but the smirk had vanished. From the side of the room, Ralph, the old groundskeeper, whispered under his breath, "That little girl just taught a billionaire about integrity." Outside, a Texas breeze rustled the high hedges that lined the estate. Inside, in the room built for power, a child with no title, no wealth, and no permission had just shifted the balance and left a billionaire speechless. James Whitmore stood slowly, too slowly, his face tight as stone. The last notes of scattered applause for the little girl Anna still hung in the air like smoke after a small but devastating explosion. He didn't clap. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. He just stood there silent, exposed, and walked away. No farewell to his guests. No word to Grace. No acknowledgement of what had just happened in his own home. His polished shoes echoed sharply against the marble as he exited the room through the side hallway, stiff-backed, jaw clenched. It was a quiet exit, but one that said too much. And the room noticed. A wealthy woman in pearls muttered, "He didn't even say thank you?" "Not even a smile," someone else said. "Man's ego bruised," another whispered, "by a 6-year-old? Oof." The murmurs thickened like a growing storm. It wasn't just admiration for Anna anymore, it was disapproval for James. A French guest leaned toward his wife. If he had an ounce of humility, he would have lifted that girl up in front of all of us. "Ugh." "But he didn't," she replied. "He left like he was the one insulted." Down the hallway, just around the corner, James heard every word. He didn't stop, didn't turn. He pushed open the door to his study, slammed it shut, and stood in the dim light, breathing hard. For a man who built his empire on confidence, today had torn a crack through the foundation. And everyone saw it. The next morning, the headlines exploded. 6-year-old girl outsmarts billionaire in surprise business showdown. Little genius or industry scandal. Whitmore silent. After breaking promise, to child prodigy. From dust to diamonds, Maid's daughter humiliates billionaire with breathtaking bilingual brilliance. The footage had come from a silent guest, someone who had casually recorded part of the exchange on their phone. A quick video of Anna reading the contract with flawless poise. A still image of her handing it back. And, most damning of all, James's blank, frozen face and his silent retreat. Social media was ablaze. Hashtags like #PayHerThee, 3%, #TinyTranslator, and #Billionaire goes silent trended within hours. Late-night comedians took aim. One joked, "Imagine being so rich you offer 3% of a $28 million deal to anyone who can translate a contract, and then a 6-year-old calls your bluff, and you ghost her like a bad Tinder date." Grace saw the news while wiping down the marble kitchen counter. Anna was sitting nearby, quietly drawing a unicorn reading a book. Grace's hands trembled as she read the headlines again. She hadn't told Anna what had happened online yet. Wasn't sure she should. Across town, in downtown Austin, James sat behind his desk in a corner office high above the city, eyes scanning news feeds with increasing dread. Whitmore dodges promise to black Maid's daughter. James Whitmore fails to acknowledge child genius. Corporate cowardice or classism? He slammed the tablet down. His assistant, Elaine, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "It's not going away," she said plainly. "I didn't do anything," James snapped. "Exactly. And that's the problem." He scowled. "It was a joke. The offer wasn't real." "She didn't know that," Elaine said. "And now it looks like you lured a child into proving her worth only to dismiss her like she didn't matter. That's not a good look, James. Especially when she's black, and brilliant, and 6. James leaned back, jaw tight. "I'm not the villain here," he said. "The media has already decided you are." He looked out the tall window at the skyline. "This shouldn't have happened." "I didn't ask her to speak," Elaine replied coldly. "But when she did, she stole the room, and instead of rising with her, you shrank." He didn't answer, but her words hit like gravel in his gut. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Grace stepped out to check the mail and was met by 2 local reporters, standing just beyond the driveway gate. "Miss Grace, is it true your daughter speaks 4 languages? Has James Whitmore apologized yet? Does Anna understand what she's done?" Grace didn't respond. She turned and walked back inside. Heart pounding. She knew this could get dangerous. She'd seen how fast stories like this were twisted, how quickly admiration turned into exploitation, or worse, backlash. Inside, Anna sat at the breakfast table, unaware of the whirlwind outside. "Mommy," she asked, "why are people talking about me on the computer?" Grace paused, then knelt beside her. "Because you did something amazing, baby. And sometimes when people see something amazing, they can't stop talking about it." Anna furrowed her brow. "Did I do something wrong?" Grace pulled her into a hug. "No, baby. You did everything right. It's the grown-ups who are trying to figure out how to catch up." Anna thought for a moment. "Will he give me the 3%? Grace hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes people in power forget what they say when it doesn't serve them anymore." Anna pulled back, eyes firm. "He shouldn't forget. Words are supposed to mean something." "Oh." Grace stared at her daughter and saw a fire there, one that reminded her of herself long ago, before life had worn her quiet. Elsewhere in the city, television anchors were dissecting every second of the viral video. Body language experts were analyzing James's retreat, and corporate think pieces began asking hard questions about race, class, and genius overlooked. The world had taken notice, and James Whitmore, for all his billions, was being defined not by what he built but by what he refused to acknowledge. The question now wasn't whether he'd respond. The question was whether he was brave enough to, and whether Anna, the maid's daughter, had just changed more than one life in a single, quiet moment of truth. By Wednesday morning, Anna's name was on the lips of every news anchor in America. From New York to Los Angeles, from breakfast shows to primetime segments, the story of a 6-year-old black girl outwitting a billionaire had captured the imagination and the outrage of an entire nation. Grace, standing in the kitchen of the estate where she still worked, stared blankly at the television mounted on the wall near the pantry. It was never meant for staff, but the volume was low and the house was empty. Or so she thought. In what many are calling a defining moment in the corporate world's relationship with race, privilege, and accountability, the anchor said, "James Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Global Holdings, is under fire for breaking a promise made publicly to a 6-year-old girl who flawlessly translated a high-level French contract in front of over 24 witnesses." Grace's fingers tensed on the counter. "She didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I think that's why it matters," came a voice behind her. She turned. Ralph, the estate's longtime gardener, stood with his cap in hand. He'd seen a lot in 30 years, births, funerals, divorces, even scandals, but he'd never seen this. "That child," Ralph said softly, "did something bigger than anyone in that room," and he walked away from it. Grace shook her head. "They'll forget her in a week." "Maybe," Ralph replied, "but maybe they won't." Oh. Upstairs, James Whitmore was living the reality Grace feared. He hadn't slept much. His PR team was split, half begging him to issue a sincere apology, the other half urging silence. The problem was, silence was no longer neutral. Silence had become an answer. "You could spin it," Elaine said, standing by his office window. "Say you were caught off guard. Make a donation to some education fund. Smile, shake hands, move on." James rubbed his temples. "I'm not going to let a viral moment define my career." Elaine didn't flinch. "Then you should have spoken up when it happened." "She's a child," James snapped. "She's your consequence," Elaine said coldly. The internet was already deep diving. People had uncovered every photo of Anna ever posted to Grace's modest Facebook account. One clip from 2 years ago, where Anna recited a poem in French, now had 2 million views. The nation had embraced her, adoring her braids, her courage, her voice that defied expectations. But not everyone was cheering. The backlash had begun, creeping like a slow storm. Some commenters questioned the authenticity of the moment. "Staged," one post read. "Probably trained like a parrot," another asked. "Where's her father? Bet he's not around." And worse, just another publicity stunt using a poor black kid. Grace saw the comments. She never meant to. A coworker had shown her, wide-eyed and excited. "You're going viral." As if virality were a blessing. Grace read until her stomach turned. The racism, the bile, the doubt, and worst of all, the threats. She shut off her phone and quietly held Anna that night until she fell asleep. The following morning, a knock came at the staff entrance. Not urgent, not aggressive, just steady. Grace opened the door slowly. It was a woman in her 50s, white blazer, press badge clipped to her lapel. Behind her was a cameraman. "I'm from Channel 12 Austin," she said gently. "We're doing a human interest piece on Anna. Not the scandal, just the brilliance." The voice people didn't expect. Grace hesitated. "She's 6. She doesn't even understand what's happening." The woman nodded. "Which is why we want to be respectful. But also, we think America needs to see her. On her own terms." Grace didn't respond right away. She looked back inside, where Anna sat at the table, reading aloud from a dictionary. Today was Italian. "She's just a kid," Grace whispered. "And that's why it matters," the woman said. "Because kids like her deserve to be seen." Inside his office, James was still pacing. The news now carried his name with a different tone, one lined with disdain. "Whitmore stays silent. Whitmore dodges moral responsibility. The billionaire who blinked." His board was nervous. His investors had questions, and for the first time in his career, James felt something worse than failure, irrelevance. "She made me look weak," he muttered. "No," Elaine replied, not missing a beat. "She made you look like a man who wasn't ready to share the spotlight, even when it was deserved." James turned to her. "You think I should do what? Offer her the money? Invite her for tea? I think you should face the fact that she didn't take anything from you. She simply revealed what you weren't willing to give." And then, as if summoned by the gods of irony, a news alert popped onto the television screen. "Live, Anna, 6-year-old language prodigy, speaks on her viral moment." Grace had finally agreed. James watched as Anna appeared on screen, sitting next to her mother, wearing the same blue dress she had worn that day. Her hands were folded, her eyes calm. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," Anna said to the reporter. "I just heard a question. And I had an answer." And what about the 3%? The reporter asked, smiling. Anna blinked. "I don't need money. I need people to believe me when I speak. That's more than 3%. James sat back in his chair. The room felt colder. The little girl had taken the most humiliating moment of his life and somehow turned it into something beautiful. Not petty, not angry, just true. The nation was falling in love with her again. And James Whitmore was being rewritten in real time, not by his publicist, not by his lawyers, but by a 6-year-old girl who hadn't meant to make a point, and yet had made the biggest one of all. The spotlight was still burning. Only now, it was clearer who deserved to be standing in it. The morning after Anna's televised interview, the Whitmore estate was unusually quiet. A hush had fallen over the mansion, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Staff moved about their tasks in silence, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting a storm to come tearing through the hallways. In his private suite, James Whitmore stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the trimmed hedges and marble fountain below. The television in the corner replayed Anna's soft, clear voice from the night before. "I don't need money. I need people to believe me when I speak. That's more than 3%. The words had echoed in his head all night, refusing to fade. There was no anger now, only something more dangerous for a man like James. Doubt. She hadn't asked for sympathy, she hadn't pointed fingers, but somehow, in that one sentence, she'd exposed a truth he didn't want to admit. He had broken something that money couldn't fix. Elaine entered without knocking, holding a thin folder in one hand and a tablet in the other. "Good morning," she said briskly, avoiding eye contact. The board called. "Again. You're scheduled to speak on CNBC at 4 o'clock today. They expect you to address the situation. Cleanly, professionally, emotionally aware." James didn't answer. He was watching Anna's interview again. Elaine sighed and dropped the folder on the coffee table. "We also have 4 speaking invitations. One's from the Texas Youth Literacy Foundation. They want Anna as keynote speaker at their fall gala. They don't even care if she speaks for 5 minutes. They just want her there. She's 6, James muttered. She's 6 and more trusted than you are right now. His jaw clenched. This is out of control. No, Elaine said calmly. This is justice catching up. James turned toward her, something sharp flickering in his gaze. But it softened just as fast. There was no point barking now. The optics were beyond saving with brute force. He sat down slowly. What would you do? Elaine hesitated, then stepped closer. I'd go see her, in person, not with cameras, not with lawyers, not with PR rehearsals. Just you, her, Grace, and maybe a damn apology. He shook his head. She's not my responsibility, Elaine replied. She wasn't supposed to be your lesson either. But here we are. Meanwhile, at a small cafe tucked behind a used bookstore downtown, Grace sipped her tea, while Anna colored quietly beside her. They'd come to escape the flood of attention, the reporters outside the estate, the phone calls, the unwanted gifts arriving in boxes with shiny bows. The cafe owner, a wiry woman in her 60s named Jean, had known Grace for years. She'd been one of the first to say, "You did good, raising a girl like that." And mean it. Any word from him? Jean asked, pouring more hot water into Grace's cup. Not a sound, Grace said. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Anna glanced up. Maybe he's mad at me. Grace touched her hand gently. Sweetheart, people like him aren't used to being surprised, especially not by someone they didn't think mattered. Anna went quiet, returning to her drawing. A woman standing nearby, recognizing Anna, leaned over and whispered, "She really changed something. You know that, right?" Grace nodded but didn't smile. That's the part I'm afraid of. By late afternoon, James found himself pacing outside the staff entrance. He'd parked in the back, no driver, no escort, just him, his breath, and a growing knot in his chest. He knocked twice. The door opened slowly. Grace stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. "Grace," he replied. "May I speak with you? With Anna?" She studied him for a long moment. "Why now?" "Because I should have the day it happened." She nodded once and opened the door. He stepped inside, suddenly unsure of his footing. The staff hallway felt colder than he remembered. Or maybe he just didn't belong here anymore. In the small den off the side kitchen, Anna was sitting on the floor, sorting puzzle pieces by color. She looked up when he entered but didn't say anything. James cleared his throat. "Hi." She looked at her mother, then back at him. "Are you here to keep your promise?" He paused. "I'm here because I didn't. And I want to say I'm sorry." Anna blinked. "Why didn't you say anything that day?" James didn't have a rehearsed answer. For once, the silence wasn't about pride. It was about shame. "Because I didn't know how to handle being wrong," he admitted. "Especially by someone half my height and 10 times braver." Anna's lips pressed into a line. Then, softly, "Did I make you look bad?" James knelt down so they were eye level. "Number I made me look bad. You just reminded everyone what truth sounds like." Grace watched, arms still folded. Her face a mix of suspicion and curiosity. James turned to her. "You raised someone extraordinary. And I didn't see it. I only saw a moment I couldn't control." Grace's expression softened just a bit. "What do you want now?" "To listen," James said, "if you'll let me." Anna stood and walked toward the nearby bookshelf. She pulled out a small notebook with a cracked red cover and held it out to him. "What's this?" he asked. "My ideas," she said, "about how grown-ups could keep their promises better. I started it after that day." James took it, gently. He opened to the first page. In large block letters, Anna had written, 1. Don't say what you don't mean. 2. Don't laugh if it's not funny to everyone. 3. When you mess up, fix it. Even if it's scary. 4. If someone small says something big, listen. James swallowed. His throat was tight. "I'll read all of it," he said. Anna nodded. "Good, because next time someone asks a question like that, I won't be the only kid who answers. I just went first." And for the first time since the incident, James Whitmore smiled, not the smug, polished smile of a man used to being admired. but the humbled, human smile of a man learning how to listen again. He didn't leave with a press release. He didn't leave with a deal. He left with a red notebook full of truth and a second chance to choose who he would become. James Whitmore left the small den that evening with the red notebook clutched tightly in his hand. It was light, barely more than 20 pages of scrawled thoughts and lopsided doodles. But to him, it felt heavier than any corporate binder he had ever carried. As he stepped out into the fading light of the estate's side garden, he heard the distant sound of laughter. Anna's laughter. High and pure, the kind of sound that didn't belong in boardrooms but somehow had more impact than any profit margin he'd ever chased. Back in his study, James sat at his desk and opened the notebook again. He didn't skim. He read. Line by line. Page by page. Page 5. Sometimes people don't want the truth because it's louder than the lies they're used to. Page 9. Saying sorry and meaning sorry aren't the same. If you're not going to do better, don't say it. Page 12. If you want people to trust you, start by trusting someone who can't give you anything back. James closed the notebook slowly. He looked around at his office lined with awards, industry plaques, and framed magazine covers with his face on them. None of them made him feel half as seen as the words of a child he had once ignored. He reached for his phone and called Elaine. Elaine, I want to set up a fund, he said. For Anna? For kids like her, he replied. And not a PR stunt. Quiet, meaningful, long-term. Elaine paused, surprised. All right. How much are we talking? Start with 5 million, he said. And set up a scholarship pathway, language and literacy. No strings, no speeches. Just give them the chance. Elaine was quiet for a beat, then replied, Now you're starting to sound like someone I can work for again. No. The next day, James asked for Grace and Anna to meet him in the garden patio, a quiet space with stone benches and magnolia trees, where the staff usually took breaks when the house was empty. He was already there when they arrived, wearing no suit jacket, just a light blue shirt rolled at the sleeves. Anna ran up, excited. Did you read it all? I did, James said, kneeling again to meet her eyes. Every single word. I learned more in 20 minutes than I've learned in the last 20 years. Grace stood a few feet back, arms still folded, cautious but no longer cold. I came to ask your permission, James said to both of them. I'd like to use your notebook to start something. A fund, a program. A chance for other kids who feel invisible to speak and be heard. Anna tilted her head. Will it be called The Red Notebook? James smiled. Only if you let me. She thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but no lying about it. No fake promises. None, he said solemnly. I've made that mistake once already. Grace finally stepped closer. What's the catch? No catch, James said. Just a man trying to be better than he was yesterday. Grace studied him, and for the first time, she didn't see the billionaire, the employer, or the man who had walked out in silence. She saw someone trying to change someone who had been broken by the truth, and was now trying to rebuild from it. I'll need to think about it, she said softly. Of course, James replied. Take all the time you need. Later that night, after Anna had gone to sleep and Grace stood alone washing dishes, her phone buzzed. It was an email from an anonymous sender, subject line, for Anna's voice. She opened it. Attached was a PDF. The charter for the Red Notebook Foundation, signed by James Whitmore, with the first $5 million allocated. A legal advisory board appointed, and the guiding principles taken word for word from Anna's original pages, spelling errors and all. At the bottom, a personal note. You reminded me that truth doesn't come from age, power, or money, it comes from courage. Thank you for showing me what it looks like. James. Grace blinked, tears welling. She didn't reply right away. She simply closed her laptop, walked to Anna's room, and stood quietly at the door, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, bathed in moonlight. The next week, whispers of the foundation leaked to the press, not from James, not from PR, but from someone on the legal team who was genuinely moved. And this time, the story hit differently. Billionaire establishes literacy fund. Inspired by 6-year-old prodigy. The Red Notebook. From viral moment to national movement. Grace's daughter, America's voice. Anna didn't fully understand the scale of it. But she understood this. More kids were writing now. She started getting drawings in the mail, letters from children saying things like, "I want to be brave like you," or, "Thank you for showing me that small people can do big things." And one morning, Grace found Anna writing a second notebook green cover this time. "What's this one for?" Grace asked. Anna smiled. "It's for after the promises. What people should do next." Grace knelt beside her. "You think people will listen again?" Anna didn't hesitate. "If they don't, I'll speak louder." And Grace believed her. So did James. And soon, the world would too. By the end of that month, the Red Notebook Foundation had made its first official announcement quietly, without press conferences or ribbon-cutting ceremonies. It was a single-page letter published online and mailed directly to a list of schools and community centers across the country. The letter didn't begin with James Whitmore's name or the Whitmore Holdings logo. It began with a child's handwriting. Sometimes kids speak the truth before grown-ups are ready to hear it, but we speak anyway. Anna, the message was clear. The fund wasn't about charity. It was about visibility, dignity, and voice. At home, Anna continued working on her new project, a green-covered notebook filled with observations, ideas, and the next steps she believed the world should take. Unlike the Red Notebook, this one didn't just highlight what had gone wrong, it envisioned what could go right. The Red Notebook showed them what not to do. She told her mother one afternoon, "This one will show them what's possible." Grace watched her daughter write in quiet awe. Her tiny hand moved across the page like she was transcribing something far older than herself. Not just childhood thoughts, but something more powerful. Purpose. But outside the safe walls of their modest apartment on the Whitmore estate, the world was turning faster than Grace liked. At first, the foundation's launch was met with overwhelming support. Teachers applauded it. Parents cried watching Anna's original interview. Celebrities tweeted words of encouragement. Even politicians briefly weighed in, calling it a model of moral responsibility in corporate America. Then came the backlash. Not all of it was loud. Some came in subtle, persistent murmurs. "I mean, she's cute, but is she really that smart? Feels like the mom's just capitalizing on her kid's moment. Isn't it dangerous to give a child this much influence?" One morning, a talk radio host declared, "We're letting a 6-year-old dictate how billionaires run their businesses now? What's next?" Bedtime stories in boardrooms. Grace had learned to tune most of it out. But one thing still worried her. Power attracts pressure. And Anna, though joyful, clever, and full of light, was still just a little girl. Late one evening, Grace sat across from James in the estate's kitchen. The two of them rarely met like this, but tonight was different. "She's writing again," Grace said, "and it's bigger. She's talking about schools, cities, even things she hears on the news." James sipped his coffee, nodding. "She's building something. I can feel it. She's 6. Grace repeated. 6, James. She should be building dollhouses, not carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders." James set his cup down slowly. "And yet, the world listens when she speaks. How many grown men with microphones can say the same?" Grace sighed. "It's not about whether they listen. It's about whether it's fair to make her the one who has to teach them." There was silence for a moment. Then James said something he hadn't told anyone. "When I was her age," he said, "I was angry all the time. I didn't know why. My father was cold. My mother was invisible. But I was told to be quiet, to focus on facts, to never feel too much." He looked at Grace now with softened eyes. "Anna, she feels everything, and still chooses kindness. That's what makes her dangerous to the world we built." Grace was quiet. Then she said, "I just want to protect her." "You are," James replied, "by letting her be heard on her own terms." The next day, Anna was invited to attend a private classroom gathering at a public elementary school downtown. Not as a celebrity, just as a visitor. A peer. When she walked into the room, the students froze. A hush fell over the children. "You're the notebook girl," one boy whispered. Anna smiled. "I brought my new notebook. Want to help me fill it?" They did. For the next hour, the kids brainstormed ideas together. Anna asked questions like, "What would you change about school if you could?" And, "What's one thing you wish grown-ups understood better?" One girl, quiet at first, raised her hand. "I wish people didn't laugh when I talk slow." Another boy added. "I wish school started later. I can't think when I'm sleepy." Someone else said, "I wish my dad came home before I go to bed." Anna wrote every word down. Every thought mattered. Back at the estate, James sat in a meeting with two of his board members. The atmosphere was tense. "You've created something unpredictable," one of them said. "This girl has become a symbol. That's a liability." "No," James replied calmly. "She's a reminder, and she's not mine to manage." The other board member raised an eyebrow. "Are you seriously telling us that a 6-year-old child now has a say in how you run this company?" James smiled faintly. I'm saying she reminded me how much I forgot to listen. And maybe it's time the company followed suit." The room went silent. That night, Anna finished writing on the final page of her green notebook. She ran to Grace, eyes sparkling. "I'm done." Grace sat beside her on the floor. "What's the last page say?" Anna held it up and read aloud. "When someone gives you the microphone, don't whisper. Say something the world can't forget." Grace wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her tightly. There were no more questions, no more fears, just pride. Anna had spoken, and the world was still listening. 2 weeks after Anna finished her green notebook, the first ripple hit harder than anyone expected. It began with an email, not from a journalist or a supporter, but from a school district administrator in a small Texas town. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding child influence on educational curriculum." James opened it at 6:47 a.m., standing by his kitchen counter with his morning coffee. By the end of the first paragraph, he was frowning. By the end of the second, he was pacing. The email questioned the appropriateness of elevating a child's opinions to the level of policymaking, and expressed concerns that public sentiment is replacing qualified expertise. Though couched in formal language, the message was clear. Not everyone believed Anna's voice belonged in conversations that shaped schools. Attached were 3 more letters this time from board members. One even from a state senator, each more pointed, more dismissive. "She's a symbol, not a solution." She's 6 years old, let her be a child. This is emotional exploitation, nothing more." James forwarded the email to Elaine, adding only 2 words, "Emergency meeting." An hour later, the executive board of the Red Notebook Foundation convened via video call. The faces on the screen were tense, eyes darting, voices guarded. They knew controversy would come eventually, but not like this. Not so soon. James sat at the head of the table in his conference room, the green notebook lying open before him. "This is an inflection point," Elaine said bluntly. "You knew it would come. The question is, do we pivot, or do we stand firm?" One of the board members, a respected education consultant, leaned forward. "She's brilliant. But we need to set boundaries. The foundation's legitimacy is at stake." James tapped a finger against the notebook. "She's not demanding we replace experts. She's asking that we listen, that we include the voices who live the experiences we're trying to fix." "But public optics," someone began. James cut them off. "Optics didn't create this foundation. Anna did. And if we retreat now, we're not protecting her. We're betraying her." Silence followed. Then Elaine spoke again, softer this time. "So, what's the next step?" James looked down at the green notebook, then back up. "We publish it," he said. "All of it." Excuse me?" One board member blinked. "We release the full green notebook. Her words, her ideas, her drawings, not as a policy document, not as a directive, but as a statement, a vision, a challenge." Elaine gave a slow nod. "Make it public. Let the world judge for themselves." James stood. "And I'll sign the introduction myself. No corporate filter, just truth." That afternoon, Grace received a call from James. "We want to share her green notebook," he said. "Only if you and Anna agree." Grace paused, processing. You think people are ready for more? I think they need it, James said. And I think this time, we tell the story our way. Anna, listening nearby, lit up. Can I draw the cover? She asked. Grace smiled. I think they'd be lucky to have it. 2 days later, the Green Notebook Manifesto was published on the Foundation's website and mailed to schools, libraries, and community centers nationwide. The cover showed a child's hand holding a microphone shaped like a sunflower, bold, bright, and unmistakably Anna's. It wasn't a press release. It wasn't polished. It was powerful. Inside were 28 pages of handwritten notes, doodles, suggestions, and dreams. Make classrooms quieter, so kids who think slowly have time to speak. Let kids teach grown-ups something once a week, so we remember how to listen. Every playground should have a bench for kids who feel left out. Sit there and someone has to come talk to you. No policy, no mandates. Just truth. As seen through the eyes of a girl who believed in better. The internet exploded again, but this time, the debate was sharper. Some called it revolutionary. Others called it irresponsible. A commentator on national television scoffed, "Are we seriously reshaping the education system because a first grader said we should be kinder?" But a teacher in Chicago posted the manifesto on her classroom wall. A librarian in Atlanta created a reading circle for children to share their own green notebooks. And in a small town in Oregon, a principal quietly added a friendship bench to the playground. Without any laws or force, change had begun. That night, as the news once again danced around their names, Grace sat beside Anna on her bed. "You know there are people who don't like what you're doing, right?" she asked gently. Anna nodded. "Because it's new, and people get scared when they don't understand something." Grace tucked the blanket around her. "What if it gets harder?" Anna looked up, her eyes calm. "Then we speak louder. But we don't yell. We stay kind. Like Mama says, kindness is power nobody sees coming." Grace kissed her forehead, her heart both proud and aching. James, watching coverage from his home, turned off the television and sat in silence. On the table beside him were 2 notebooks, red and green. He ran a hand over their covers like sacred texts. He didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, he knew he wasn't afraid of it. He was ready, because a 6-year-old girl had dared to speak. And now, the world had no choice but to listen. By the 3rd week after the Green Notebook Manifesto's release, things began to shift, not just in classrooms and community centers, but in boardrooms, political circles, and newsrooms. The message had spread wider than anyone anticipated. What began as the simple ideas of a 6-year-old girl had sparked uncomfortable conversations in spaces usually allergic to childlike honesty. And now, the pushback had teeth. James Whitmore sat across from his attorney, Dean Kessler, in the quiet corner of his private office. On the desk between them lay a heavy manila folder, one that had arrived with a confidential stamp and a heavy sigh. "This is serious, James," Dean said, flipping open the folder. "A coalition of parents from 4 states is filing an official grievance against the Foundation." "For what?" James asked, keeping his voice calm but tight. Quote, "Inappropriate influence of a minor on public education, overreach of philanthropic agenda, and politicization of childhood innocence." Dean leaned back. "They're claiming you've weaponized a child to shape policy." James gave a dry laugh. "So now kindness and listening are political crimes?" Dean didn't smile. "They're not laughing. And there are whispers of calling you in for a congressional hearing. They want to make an example." James leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "What about Grace and Anna? They're not named yet, but we both know that won't last, especially if this becomes televised." James stood and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him, no longer the polished executive from magazine covers. He looked older. But maybe, he thought, also more human. "We tell them the truth," he said quietly. Dean blinked. "What truth?" "That we didn't use a child to push a message. A child used us to spread one we forgot." That evening, Grace received the call. Her voice tightened as she listened, one hand gripping the countertop. "They want Anna to testify?" she repeated, her voice low, wary. "Yes," James said on the other end. "But I'm not going to let that happen unless you decide it's right." Grace turned, watching Anna in the living room, twirling slowly in her socks to the sound of piano music playing from an old speaker. So innocent. So unaware of how loud her whisper had become. "She's just a little girl," Grace said softly. "She never asked to be the face of something." "She didn't," James agreed. "But now people are trying to turn her into a headline, and if we don't take control of the narrative, they will." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if she doesn't need to speak this time? What if her words already have?" The next morning, Anna awoke to find her mother and James sitting together at the kitchen table. A laptop sat open between them. "We want to show you something," Grace said, sliding the laptop toward her daughter. Anna climbed into her chair and leaned forward. On screen was a video, carefully edited, set to quiet music. It began with the image of her red notebook, then the green one, then scenes from classrooms around the country, kids sitting in circles reading aloud, teachers pointing to Anna's ideas on whiteboards, parents building kindness corners in their homes. Then came the voices, children from every background, reading her words. "Don't say what you don't mean. When you mess up, fix it. If someone small says something big, listen. Speak loud but stay kind." Anna's eyes widened. She smiled. Then her lips began to tremble. James leaned forward. "This is what you've done, Anna. Not by shouting, not by fighting, just by being honest." Anna looked up. "Are they mad at me?" James shook his head. "They're scared. But being scared doesn't mean they're right." Grace reached over and took her daughter's hand. "We made a decision, baby. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to prove anything. We're going to speak for you. And more importantly, we're going to let others speak because of you." Anna stared at the screen a little longer. Then she whispered, "Can we make a third notebook?" Grace tilted her head. "What color?" "Blue," Anna said confidently. For hope. That same week, James made his most vulnerable move yet. He wrote an open letter, not through a press agent, not on company letterhead, but as himself. Just James. It read, in part, "I was taught to believe that leadership was about being the loudest in the room. Anna taught me that sometimes the loudest voice comes from the smallest person. She didn't ask to lead a movement. She asked to be believed. And we grown-ups, institutions, people in power failed to answer with the urgency she deserved. But we can change that now. Not by putting her on trial, but by listening, deeply and humbly, to what she already said." The letter went viral overnight. Unlike the first wave of noise, this one was quieter but more powerful. Letters from teachers, videos from children, and thousands of digital thank you notes poured in. Some addressed to Anna, others to Grace, and many simply signed, "Listening now." And then came the message that would shift everything. Elaine burst into James's office holding a phone. "You need to see this," she said, breathless. It was a social media post from a U.S. Congresswoman, one known for her stoic demeanor and sharp tongue. The post showed Anna's sunflower microphone drawing from the green notebook, with a caption, "When a 6-year-old reminds a nation what truth looks like, it's not weakness to follow, it's wisdom." James stared at it in silence. "She's going to read your letter into the congressional record," Elaine said. The hearing's canceled. James closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he didn't know he was holding. They hadn't won by fighting. They had won by standing still and letting the truth echo. That night, Anna sat cross-legged on her bed, her new blue notebook open in her lap. On the first page, in slightly wobbly handwriting, she wrote, "If they try to turn down the volume of your heart, write louder." Grace stood in the doorway, watching her daughter begin again. No spotlight, no cameras, just a blue notebook and a girl who knew the world was still listening. Spring arrived with warm breezes and blooming magnolias, but for Anna, the season felt like a quiet revolution. While most 6-year-olds were learning to tie their shoes or spell longer words, she was answering letters from classrooms in Detroit, Tulsa, and rural Mississippi. Children had started their own blue notebook clubs, where they wrote about the world they wanted to grow up in. James Whitmore, once a name associated with exclusive real estate and sterile skyscrapers, was now fielding calls from school boards, advocacy groups, and even senators. But what came next, neither he nor Grace expected. It started with a simple envelope. No branding, no return address. Just one line on the front, Office of the First Lady. Grace opened it at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Anna, I've been reading your notebooks with great interest. You remind me of the girls I used to teach, bright, brave, and unapologetically honest. I'd love to meet you. We're hosting a children's literacy summit next month at the White House, and I'd be honored if you'd attend as our youngest guest of honor. Bring your notebooks. We'll be listening. With admiration, First Lady Evelyn Grant. Grace read the letter 3 times before calling James. She wants Anna at the White House, she said, half in awe, half in disbelief. There was silence on the line. Then James replied, Then we're going to D.C. The days leading up to the trip were a whirlwind. Anna picked out her favorite overalls, insisting on the ones with the sunflower patch, and packed her 3 notebooks herself. Red, green, blue. She tied them with a purple ribbon, because it makes them feel like a family. Oh, Grace, calm on the outside but nervous beneath the surface, watched her daughter with quiet pride. The journey they had taken from invisibility to national conversation was surreal, and yet, it all felt strangely right. As if this was where the truth was always meant to lead. James flew with them privately, not in a luxury jet, but in a quiet, modest aircraft. He wore no tie, no watch, and sat beside Anna reading one of her letters from a child named Diego in El Paso. Dear Anna, my teacher said your notebook made her cry. I didn't get it at first, but then she let us all make our own. Mine is yellow. It's for kids like me who don't speak English first. I wrote in Spanish. Is that okay? Your friend, Diego. Anna smiled and nodded to herself. I'll write him back. Yellow is brave. The White House was larger than Anna imagined, but quieter than she expected. Secret Service agents greeted them with calm smiles, and one even bent down to compliment her sunflower patch. That's a strong flower, he said. Always finds the sun. In the East Room, chairs were arranged in a wide semicircle. Children from across the country sat with their own notebooks in hand, different colors, different shapes. Some were decorated with glitter, others with stickers. The room buzzed with nervous energy. When the First Lady entered, everyone stood. She was elegant, composed. But when she saw Anna, her face lit up like a mother seeing her own child come home. You must be Anna, she said, offering her hand. Anna shook it, then reached into her bag and offered her blue notebook. This one's not finished yet, she said. But you can read it if you want. The First Lady opened the notebook, smiling as she flipped through its pages. One line caught her eye. If someone laughs at your hope, lend them some of yours. Just a little. She closed the notebook and looked at Anna. Would you mind reading a few pages later today? After my remarks? Anna nodded, and Grace, standing at the back of the room, felt her heart race. The summit began with speeches from education leaders, literacy champions, and child psychologists. All well-spoken, all carefully scripted. Then, the First Lady stepped up to the podium. I'd like to end today, not with more data, she said, but with a voice we almost didn't hear until she reminded us to listen. She turned to Anna. Anna, would you join me? There was a beat of silence. Then, the room applauded softly as Anna stepped forward, notebooks in hand. She stood on a small stool so she could reach the microphone. The ribbon was untied. The red, green, and blue notebooks were in her arms like sacred books. She opened the blue one. I want to read something I wrote last week, she began, her voice clear and steady. It's called The Grown Ups I Dream About. She read, I dream about grown-ups who say I don't know and don't feel scared. Grown-ups who cry when they see kids hurting, even if it's not their kid. Grown-ups who fix what they didn't break. Grown-ups who remember what it's like to be small. And grown-ups who don't get mad when a kid says something true. The room was utterly still. One man dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. A teacher from Vermont put her hand over her heart. Anna closed the notebook gently. That's what I wrote. I hope it helps. Applause filled the room, not loud or chaotic, but warm, full, rising from something deeper than decorum. It was respect. Real, earned respect. Later, As the event wound down, reporters asked questions. Some pushed toward Grace, others toward James, but Anna was whisked away gently by a librarian from Maryland who wanted to show her the story corner. Grace let her go. She knew Anna would find her way back. That night, as they flew home, James sat beside Grace in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, "You know, I used to believe my legacy would be buildings, profits, a name on towers." Grace glanced at him. "And now?" James looked at Anna, who was asleep with her notebooks in her arms. "Now I hope it's just being remembered as someone who finally listened." Grace didn't reply. She didn't need to. Sometimes, the loudest truths required no words at all. 2 days after returning from the White House, Grace woke to find a folded piece of paper slipped under their apartment door. There was no envelope, no name on the outside, just a childlike drawing of a microphone wrapped in a vine of flowers. She turned it over in her hands as the early morning light crept across the floor. Something about the way it was placed, silently and intentionally, made her heart skip a beat. Inside was a short letter, neatly typed. "To Anna, you don't know me. I'm 12. I can't say my name yet because it's not safe. But I saw you on television. I read your blue notebook online. My parents don't know I printed it, but I keep it under my bed. I read it when I feel small. I don't feel small when I read it. I wrote something too. Maybe it's not good, but it's mine. If I leave it here tomorrow, will someone read it? I hope so." Grace sat down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. Anna was still asleep, curled under her blanket, her sunflower patch visible on her pajamas. Grace didn't wake her. Not yet. This moment was for holding, not sharing. The next morning, just as promised, another paper appeared. This time, a poem. Handwritten, wobbly lines and scratched out words. "I'm not good at loud. My voice forgets how, but on paper, I'm braver. And on paper, I'm now." It was signed only with a small star. Grace folded it gently and placed it beside Anna's notebooks. When her daughter woke, blinking in the soft sunlight, Grace showed it to her. Anna read in silence, then whispered, "I want to write them back." So she did. To the friend with the star, "Your voice isn't small. It's just quiet thunder. Quiet thunder shakes the ground too. You're not alone. I hear you." Anna. She left the note under the door that night, along with a blank blue notebook, tied with a silver ribbon. The next day, it was gone. What started as a silent exchange became a ritual. More children, neighbors, children of staff, kids from nearby schools began to send letters. Some were drawings, others were stories or simple confessions. "I miss my dad. He doesn't come home much anymore. Sometimes I get scared when I ask questions in class. My teacher told me I talk too much, but my grandma says I'm full of music." They all ended the same way. "Can you hear me?" Anna answered everyone. By week's end, the corner of their apartment by the window was stacked with envelopes. The notebooks red, green, blue had grown to include purple, yellow, even silver. Each color carried a voice, a truth, a piece of someone who hadn't known they were allowed to speak. One afternoon, James walked in, expecting another foundation update. Instead, he found Grace seated on the floor, reading a story aloud from a tattered spiral-bound notebook. Anna sat beside her, listening intently. James stopped in the doorway. "I didn't know we were running a postal service now," he said, smiling gently. Grace looked up. "It's not mail, it's trust." Anna nodded. "And trust is heavier than packages." James stepped closer, scanning the pile of letters. "Are you reading all of these?" "Yes," Anna said, "because if they're brave enough to send it, I should be brave enough to hear it." James knelt down beside them. "What do you want to do with all of it?" Anna glanced at her mother, then back at James. "I want to make a book," she said. "Not about me, but us." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Us?" "All the kids who don't get to talk," Anna replied, "and the grown-ups who finally listen." James leaned back, visibly moved. "You want the next notebook to be a collection?" Anna smiled, "Like a choir, but with stories instead of songs." He exhaled. "Then let's make it happen." That weekend, a quiet team of editors, child psychologists, and educators assembled in one of Whitmore's smaller offices. There was no fanfare, no PR campaign, just long tables, warm coffee, and the careful turning of pages. The project was called the Many Voices Notebook. Every submission was reviewed by hand. Anonymity was preserved where requested. Illustrations were left untouched. Spelling errors preserved. The imperfections were the story. Anna was present for every session she could attend, sitting cross-legged in a chair far too big for her, reading aloud from the letters. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed, but she always read. One day, she held up a letter from a boy named Malik in Alabama. "Dear Notebook, my mom says boys aren't supposed to cry, but I cry anyway. I think that makes me strong. Do you think so too?" Anna looked at the room. "It does, right?" No one answered. They just nodded, some brushing tears from their eyes. By the end of the month, the first draft of the Many Voices Notebook was complete. James held it in his hands, a modest, soft-cover compilation of truths so raw they felt like confessionals whispered in the dark. Elaine, flipping through it, whispered, "This isn't just a book. It's a mirror." The foundation planned a quiet launch, one that wouldn't spotlight Anna but would celebrate the community of voices she helped awaken. But something unexpected happened. A teacher from Kansas posted one excerpt from the book on social media. The quote went viral overnight. "If I tell you the truth and you look away, that hurts more than if you never asked." Within 48 hours, pre-orders for the book broke records for a nonprofit release. Schools requested classroom sets. Libraries made space on their front displays. Parents wrote in requesting extra copies for their kids to give to their friends. James, overwhelmed, stood by the office window one evening as the sun dipped below the skyline. "This started with a dare," he said aloud. Grace, seated behind him, replied softly, "A dare to listen." And in the other room, Anna, knees tucked under her chin, pen in hand, opened a fresh notebook. This time the cover was orange, because, she said, orange feels like a sunrise. 3 weeks after the Many Voices Notebook launched, Anna received a letter unlike any other. It wasn't colorful or folded with stickers like most of the others. It arrived in a plain, cream-colored envelope, handwritten in elegant, looping cursive. On the back was a gold seal embossed with the words, "Department of Education, Office of Community Engagement." Grace opened it carefully, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the letter inside. She read it twice before walking into the living room, where Anna was drawing suns in her orange notebook. "This one's special," she said, handing it to her daughter. Anna tilted her head and read slowly. "Dear Anna, your notebooks reminded us that the loudest changes often begin in the quietest hearts. We would be honored to invite you and your mother to our National Community Leaders Forum in Chicago this spring. You won't need to speak, just bring your notebooks, your thoughts, and your courage. Your presence would mean everything to the children we serve. Sincerely, Dr. Penelope Warren, U.S. Secretary of Education." Anna's lips parted. "Chicago?" Grace nodded, though her chest tightened. These moments were becoming more frequent. More invitations. More attention. And while the recognition was meaningful, she wondered, how much is too much? That night, Grace called James. "They want her at a national forum," she said flatly. James was silent for a moment. Then, "Do you want her to go?" Grace looked at Anna asleep on the couch, her orange notebook clutched against her chest like a favorite stuffed animal. "I want her to be a child," she whispered. "But I also want the world to hear what a child's voice sounds like before the world hardens her." James understood. "Then let's make sure she's surrounded by people who protect that voice, not exploit it." The Chicago event was different, less formal, more intentional. The forum took place in a historic public library, its domed ceiling painted like a sunrise, its wooden floors echoing with the voices of community leaders, activists, teachers, and families from every corner of the country. Anna walked in quietly, wearing her orange jacket and carrying all 5 notebooks in a canvas tote bag. She wasn't here to make a speech. She was here to listen. Dr. Penelope Warren, a graceful woman in her 60s with soft eyes and a voice like velvet, greeted them personally. "You must be the Anna I've heard so much about," she said, kneeling down to Anna's level. Anna offered a small smile. I'm just writing things down. Everyone else is doing the hard parts. Dr. Warren laughed gently. Sometimes, writing things down is the hard part. Grace stayed close, always watching, always listening, but she began to notice something new about her daughter in this space. Anna wasn't shrinking under the pressure. She was expanding gently, like light through a curtain. Throughout the day, attendees would spot her from across the room and approach with nervous excitement. I'm Mr. Juneau, high school counselor from Oregon, one man said. I quoted you last week in my session on conflict resolution. A teacher from Baltimore crouched down beside her. You helped me stop yelling. I read your speak kind, not loud line every morning before class. Anna would smile politely, sometimes nodding, but mostly listening. She didn't speak much that day, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she understood something the adults hadn't. The more they talked, the more she learned what still needed to be written. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Warren invited a few guests to join a roundtable discussion. Anna sat quietly in the corner as the adults debated solutions to student mental health, digital learning, and equity in rural schools. At one point, a woman in a dark blazer said sharply, "We need scalable models, not emotion, not anecdotes. This isn't about feelings, it's about results." The room fell uncomfortably still. Anna, without being asked, raised her hand. The moderator hesitated. Anna, would you like to add something? She stood, reached into her bag, and pulled out the orange notebook. I think numbers are important, she said, voice steady. But if you fix a school without fixing how kids feel in it, it's still broken. A few people chuckled awkwardly. One man raised an eyebrow. And how would you suggest we fix how they feel? Anna flipped to a page near the front. She read, ask them who they are before you tell them what to learn. Make space for quiet kids, loud kids, and sad kids. Tell them they're safe before you tell them the rules. Don't just grade their answers. Grade how we listened. There was silence. The woman in the blazer looked away. Dr. Warren smiled. That's perhaps the most complete proposal we've heard all day. Anna returned to her seat, not triumphant, not boastful, just grounded. She didn't need applause. She needed understanding. And it was growing. That evening, in their modest hotel room overlooking Lake Michigan, Grace and Anna sat curled together under a throw blanket, watching the city light up below. You were brave today, Grace said softly. Anna shrugged. I wasn't scared. Not really. Grace kissed the top of her daughter's head. You don't have to be brave every day. Anna thought for a moment. But I think I want to. A knock on the door interrupted the quiet moment. James stood there with takeout deep dish pizza, 2 sodas, and a small orange envelope. This came for you downstairs, he said, handing it to Anna. Inside was a card, handmade from construction paper. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. Your notebook made me want to write too. I used to be scared of my own voice. Now I'm just learning how to hear it. Thank you. Ruben, Aga Elf. Anna looked up at James, her eyes wide. He's learning how to hear his own voice. James nodded. Because you let him borrow yours for a while. She smiled, then reached for her pen. She had more to write. The orange notebook wasn't full yet. But sunrise had just begun. 2 weeks after the Chicago Forum, an unexpected invitation arrived, not from a government office or school district, but from a place far more public. The National Children's Advocacy Gala, held annually in New York City's Lincoln Center. It was an event known more for celebrity appearances and glossy donations than quiet notebooks and honest truths. Still, tucked among the elegant cursive invitations was one addressed to Anna Whitmore, age 6. Grace almost dismissed it. The last thing she wanted was to parade her daughter in front of flashing lights and red carpets. But then she read the letter again. This year, our theme is, When Children Teach Us. We would be honored if Anna would be our closing guest, not to perform, not to entertain, just to remind us what we've forgotten. It wasn't the stage that made Grace pause, it was the sincerity. She showed the letter to James the next day over coffee, in the foundation's office. It feels too big, Grace said, too polished, too loud. James studied the invitation. Then maybe what we need is a little quiet in that room. They agreed on one condition. Anna wouldn't give a speech. She would simply read one page from her notebook. One truth. One moment. The evening of the gala. The Lincoln Center glittered with evening gowns, black ties, and shimmering chandeliers. But Anna wore her sunflower overalls with a white cardigan and carried her now famous tote bag. 5 notebooks inside. A 6th, orange, still in progress. Grace held her hand tightly as they entered through the side entrance, escorted past paparazzi in velvet ropes. No press, no statements, just intention. Backstage, Anna sat quietly, drawing tiny stars in the margins of her orange notebook. She didn't seem nervous. She never really did, but her eyes scanned the curtains, listening to the muffled voices echoing through the theater. On stage, speaker after speaker shared messages of hope, progress, and ambition. Some recited statistics, others told personal stories. There were tears, laughter, applause. Then, as the house lights dimmed slightly, a hush fell over the audience. The host returned to center stage. And now, to close tonight, we welcome someone whose words have done more in the past 6 months than most campaigns in the past decade. She reminds us that leadership doesn't begin with age, it begins with truth. Please welcome Anna Whitmore. A single spotlight warmed the stage. The audience leaned in. Anna walked slowly onto the wooden floor, her tote bag swinging lightly. She carried nothing else, no script, no podium. She stopped at center stage, pulled the orange notebook from her bag, and opened to a page she had bookmarked with a paperclip. Then she read, quietly but clearly. I think adults forget what it feels like to be small. Not just short, but unsure. They say be strong but mean don't cry. They say speak up but only if they agree. They say dream big but laugh when it's too big. So I wrote this to say, we're not here to be cute. We're here to be heard, even if our voices are still growing. She closed the notebook and looked up at the crowd. Silence stretched, then applause. Slow at first, then rising, then a standing ovation. Not loud and wild like at a concert, but a deep, resonant wave. Some audience members wiped their eyes. Others held their programs to their chests. Grace watched from the wings, her heart full and fragile at once. Anna stepped back from the microphone and walked off stage. No bow, no wave, just a small smile as she returned to her mother's side. You did perfect, Grace whispered, kneeling to hug her. Anna whispered back, I didn't say anything new. I just said it like a kid. James, waiting near the side curtain, met them with a look of quiet awe. You shook a room full of power without even raising your voice, he said. Anna looked up at him, thoughtful. Some rooms just need to be reminded to listen. That night, back in their hotel suite overlooking the city skyline, Anna sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through her orange notebook. Grace had ordered hot cocoa. James had taken off his tie and unbuttoned his collar, visibly exhausted but at peace. I want to write about the stage, Anna said suddenly, tapping her pen to the page. What about it? Grace asked. Anna chewed her lip, then wrote slowly. The stage is just a table with more chairs watching, but if you whisper something true, even the chairs lean in. James chuckled softly. That's one way to put it. Then, after a pause, he added, Anna, have you thought about what comes next? Anna looked up. Next? The notebooks, he explained. What if they weren't just books? What if we built places where kids could write and share, no matter where they lived? Grace's eyes met his. Like writing centers? He nodded. Funded through the foundation, one in every state. Places where children, not just the loud or gifted ones, get to write their truth and be heard. No grades, no judgments, just voices. Anna's eyes lit up. Can they have colors? Colors? Grace asked. Like the notebooks. Red rooms, green rooms, blue ones for feelings, orange for dreams. James smiled. Anna, I think you just designed the blueprint. Grace exhaled, already envisioning the ripple effects. Schools, libraries, rec centers turned into safe spaces for expression. And what will we call them? James asked. Anna looked out the window, where the city shimmered below. She whispered, the listening rooms. James and Grace fell silent, the name settling between them like fresh snow. That night, Anna fell asleep with the orange notebook still open beside her, and somewhere across the city in bedrooms, shelters, foster homes, and quiet corners a dozen other children scribbled in their own notebooks, unaware that a girl just like them had spoken on a stage of chandeliers and velvet seats and changed everything. Because she hadn't tried to impress them, she'd simply reminded them to listen. The first listening room opened on a rainy Thursday morning in Raleigh, North Carolina. It wasn't in a government building or a marble-floored institution. It was in a modest brick community center wedged between a laundromat and a corner store that sold fresh biscuits and boiled peanuts. The only thing different about the building was the bright red door, painted that color by Anna herself, with small yellow sunflowers blooming from the corners. Over the entrance, a hand-carved wooden sign read, "The Listening Room, Everyone Has a Voice." Grace and Anna had flown in the night before, staying in a small hotel with creaky floors and floral wallpaper. Anna didn't mind. She had slept curled beneath her orange notebook, which now had so many pages filled. She had started writing in the margins. The ribbon cutting was quiet, just how Anna wanted it. No reporters, no stage, no bright lights. Only a few teachers, neighborhood parents, a retired librarian named Mrs. Hargrove who had donated hundreds of blank journals, and about a dozen kids huddled under umbrellas, curious eyes peeking out from behind raincoats. James stood in the back, watching it all unfold with the quiet pride of a man who had once thought success was square footage and market value. Now, success looked like a chipped wooden bench with 3 kids sitting shoulder to shoulder, sharing colored pencils and writing their first poems. Anna stood beside the door with a pair of oversized scissors in hand. Grace knelt beside her, straightening the ribbon one last time. "You ready?" Grace asked. Anna nodded. "Can we leave the door open after?" "Always," Grace smiled. She snipped the ribbon. A small cheer rose from the group. But what followed was even better silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that comes when something sacred begins. Inside, the listening room was simple. Walls painted soft colors. Beanbags, long tables with stacks of notebooks in every shade imaginable. Crayons, pencils, markers, shelves with children's letters laminated and framed like museum pieces. A sign on the wall read, "You don't have to shout to be heard here." Anna walked in and placed her 6 notebooks, red, green, blue, purple, orange, and a brand new yellow on the main table. She opened the yellow one to the first page and wrote in neat print, "This notebook belongs to everyone. Take a page. Leave your truth." A girl with frizzy braids and unsure eyes approached the table. "Do I have to write a story?" "No," Anna said. "You can draw, or write your name, or just say how you feel." The girl picked up a purple marker and drew a stick figure holding a balloon. Underneath, she wrote, "This is me. Not alone." Anna smiled. "That's a good beginning." The idea spread faster than James anticipated. Within 3 months, listening rooms opened in Cleveland, Fresno, and a reservation outside Flagstaff. The formula was the same. Simple spaces, trusted adults, shelves of colored notebooks, and no rules except one: you must listen before you respond. The rooms weren't just for writing. They became havens. A boy in Indiana used his notebook to write apologies to his father in prison. A girl in Georgia used hers to explain what anxiety felt like when no one else seemed to understand. A nonverbal child in Montana pasted pictures cut from magazines, forming a collage that told stories without a single word. One day, Grace received a letter from a principal in Detroit. "Your daughter changed our school more than any curriculum ever could. We now start each week with notebook mornings. Kids write, teachers read, we respond. It's like we found the missing piece in how we teach." Man. Anna read that letter 3 times before folding it and placing it in the back pocket of her orange notebook. But with growth came questions. Some critics argued that the listening rooms were too soft, non-academic, or emotionally indulgent. News outlets published headlines like, "Is a 6-year-old shaping education policy?" "Notebook movement, cute or concerning?" "Feelings over facts?" Anna didn't respond. Not publicly, but one afternoon, sitting on a windowsill with her knees tucked to her chest, she asked Grace, "Why do some people get mad when kids say things?" Grace chose her words carefully. "Because sometimes kids say things adults were too afraid to say first." Anna nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's why kids have smaller hands. so we can reach into small, quiet places they forgot to look. Grace stared at her daughter, stunned by the simplicity of the truth. A few weeks later, James called with unexpected news. "I want to build one here," he said. "Here?" Grace asked. "In Manhattan?" "In our headquarters." Grace was silent for a moment. "In the middle of your corporate offices?" "Yes," he replied. "A listening room on the top floor. No board tables, no suits, just a space to remind everyone why we started this." Anna overheard and beamed. "Make the door green," she called out. James chuckled. "Why green?" "Because green is what happens after something grows." The green door was painted a week later, and behind it, executives began their mornings by reading a page from the Many Voices notebook. They took turns writing responses. Some employees left anonymous letters about burnout, grief, or ideas they were afraid to share aloud. The room didn't fix the company, but it changed the conversations, and that was enough. On a warm evening in late May, Anna sat on the steps outside their apartment, the city humming softly around her. She held her orange notebook, nearly full, and watched the sun begin to dip below the rooftops. Grace sat beside her with 2 mugs of warm tea. "You've been quiet today," she said. Anna looked up, thoughtful. "I think I'm almost done with this one." Grace nodded. "What will the next one be?" Anna opened to the last page and wrote slowly. "Next comes the gray notebook, because not everything is clear. But even in fog, you can still listen." Grace smiled, placing a gentle hand over Anna's distance. And just like that, another notebook was born. Not with fanfare, not with headlines, just with truth. And the world, quietly, leaned in. The gray notebook began quietly, no ribbon cutting, no announcement. Anna simply placed it on the coffee table one Saturday morning. Its cover was soft, almost like felt, and unmarked. No sunflowers, no title, not even her name on the inside. She turned to the first page and stared at the blankness. Then she wrote, "Some truths are harder to say. This is where they go." Grace noticed the new notebook that evening. "Gray, huh?" Anna nodded. "It's for the in-between things. Not good, not bad. Just not easy." Grace understood. Life, after all, wasn't always painted in the bold clarity of Anna's red or blue or orange. Sometimes life was fog. Uncertainty, spaces between right and wrong where hearts still beat but didn't always know which way to turn. Anna's first entry in the gray notebook wasn't about herself. It was about Maya, a girl from the listening room in Fresno. Maya had sent a letter with no return address, only a shaky message. "My mom says love should never hurt, but sometimes it does. I don't know who to tell. Is it okay to love someone who scares you?" Anna wrote back but didn't send it. Instead, she pasted her reply into the gray notebook. "Sometimes people we love forget how to love back. That's not your fault. It's okay to walk away, even if it takes time." That became the notebook's purpose. A place for replies that couldn't be delivered. For feelings too big to say out loud, but too real to ignore. Over the next few weeks, the gray notebook filled faster than any other. It held a story from a boy whose father was deported, a drawing from a girl whose brother stopped talking after their house burned down, a poem from a non-binary teen in Kansas who had been silenced at school, a note from a boy in foster care who wrote, "I pretend I'm tough, so they won't give me away again." Anna read them all. She didn't always understand everything. She was only 6. But she understood pain. And she knew pain didn't need to be solved, it needed to be seen. One evening, James visited their apartment with something new. Not a press release, not a donation, a proposal. "We've had a request," he said, "from the National Mental Health Coalition. They want to adapt the listening room model into counseling centers for youth in transitional housing. But they want you," he looked at Anna, "to choose what it's called." Anna considered that quietly. Then she opened her gray notebook and pointed to a small, unassuming entry. It said, "Not broken, still here." James read it, then looked at her with admiration. "That's what we'll call them." The Not Broken centers began as 3 small pilots. One in Philadelphia, one in Tucson, one in a converted church basement in Milwaukee. Each center was built around a simple belief. You don't have to be fixed to be worthy. Unlike typical counseling spaces, these centers began with a notebook, not a clipboard. Kids were invited to write or draw anything before speaking to an adult. Therapists were trained to read the pages first, not analyze them. The notebook came before the diagnosis. One 12-year-old boy named Carlos walked into the Milwaukee Center and refused to speak for 3 days. But on the 4th day, he handed over his notebook. On the first page was a drawing of a cracked egg with golden light spilling out. Underneath, he wrote, "Even broken things shine." The team framed it and hung it in the entryway. Back in New York, Anna was beginning to feel the weight of it all. Not just the notebooks. The letters. The whispers, the expectations. She still smiled. She still played. But one afternoon, Grace found her curled in a corner of her room, her knees tucked to her chest, the gray notebook open but untouched. "What's wrong, baby?" Grace asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know what to write," Anna said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's okay," Grace replied. "Maybe this one's supposed to listen to you for a while." Anna looked at her mom, eyes glassy. "What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing one day?" Grace wrapped her arms around her. "You're not here to be perfect, Anna. You're here to be honest. That's what makes people trust you." Anna didn't answer right away. She pulled the notebook into her lap and finally wrote, "Today I don't feel wise. I just feel small. I think I need someone to write back this time." Grace smiled. "Then let's write together." And for the first time, mother and daughter filled a page side by side. Grace wrote about her fears about raising a daughter whose light burned so brightly. She worried the world would forget to let her rest. Anna drew a balloon with a crack in it and wrote, "Even balloons need time to float again." The next morning, a surprise came in the mail. It was from Maya, the girl from Fresno. She had finally sent her return address, along with a letter. "I left. Me and Mom are staying with my aunt now. It still hurts, but it's a safe hurt, not a scary one. I don't know what happens next. But I read what you wrote in your book. I believed it. Thank you." Anna hugged the letter to her chest. Grace watched from the doorway, eyes brimming. "You gave her more than a notebook," she said softly. "You gave her permission." Anna nodded. "Gray things don't stay gray forever." She opened the last page of the gray notebook and wrote, "Not everything has an answer, but everything deserves a place to be heard." Then she closed it, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Outside, the sky was clearing. The gray had started to fade, but the notebook quiet, weathered, and full remained. A reminder that even in the fog, there is always a way forward. You just have to listen. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the letter arrived. There was nothing flashy about it, no gold seal, no thick parchment, no handwriting in perfect cursive, just a plain white envelope, slightly crumpled, with a return address from Huntsville Correctional Facility in Texas. Grace found it first. She almost tossed it aside, assuming it was a clerical mistake or misdirected notice. But when she saw the name on the envelope to Miss Anna Whitmore, care of Grace Williams, she paused. Her fingers trembled slightly as she brought it to Anna's room. Anna was sprawled on the floor, coloring circles into a fresh brown notebook. The gray one now rested quietly on the shelf with its predecessors worn but whole. Grace handed her the envelope. "It's from someone in prison," she said gently. Anna looked up, surprised but not afraid. "Then they probably have something important to say." She opened the letter slowly. The paper inside was thin and lined. Written in jagged blue ink. "Dear Anna, I saw your face on the news last month, not because of a crime or scandal, but because of something I thought I'd never see again in this world, kindness without strings. My name is Marcus. I've been locked up for 12 years, did some things I won't defend, but I read one of your notebook pages in a magazine a guard gave me. It said, 'The world doesn't need you to be perfect, just real.' That line undid me. I haven't written anything real in a long time. But I started. Because of you. Would you mind if I kept writing you?" Anna folded the letter quietly and placed it in her lap. She didn't speak for a moment. Grace knelt beside her. "You don't have to respond. But what if I'm the only person who does?" Anna whispered. Grace was quiet. There was a weight in those words, a truth that landed deeper than any page in a notebook. That night, Anna wrote back, "Dear Marcus, thank you for telling the truth. It's hard to do that, especially when you feel alone. You're not the only one who's made mistakes. Some of us make quiet ones, some big. But I think when you write something honest, it makes space for someone else to tell the truth too. So yes, you can write me, and I'll read every word. She signed it with a small heart and the word listening. James was skeptical at first. He worried about boundaries, public perception, even safety. But Anna insisted on replying. Grace stood by her. If we say every voice matters, she told James, we don't get to decide which ones are worth hearing. And so began a correspondence that would stretch over months. Letters from Marcus came every week, some short, others pages long. He wrote about his past, about guilt, about the day he watched his daughter be taken away when he was sentenced. He wrote about the silence that followed, how the world moved on without him, and slowly, Marcus began writing poetry. Rough at first, but real. Anna replied with encouragement, sometimes with questions, other times with pages torn from her brown notebook that read things like, a mistake is a place you leave, not a place you live. Or, sometimes the best apology is to become someone different. Marcus's letters changed, too. They grew brighter, more hopeful. He began mentoring younger inmates, starting a writing circle. One guard even wrote to Anna to thank her. You're doing more from your living room than half the world does with a platform, he said. Then, one letter arrived with a stamp marked urgent. Marcus's parole hearing had been moved up months earlier than expected. The board had reviewed his writing, his mentorship work, his changed behavior. But there was still hesitation, a criminal record that long doesn't vanish with good intentions. He ended the letter with a simple request. I know I have no right to ask, but if you believe in second chances, would you speak for me? Grace froze when she read it. He wants you to testify? Anna nodded. He's not asking for a free pass. Just a voice that says he changed. James leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, clearly wrestling with the implications. This will be public, Anna. People will criticize it. They'll say you're naive, that you're being used. Anna looked him straight in the eye. Or they'll hear something they've been afraid to believe. 2 weeks later, Anna sat in a parole hearing room in Huntsville, surrounded by lawyers, prison staff, and a small panel of tired-eyed board members. She didn't wear a blazer or fancy dress. She wore her cardigan, sunflower pin, and held her brown notebook in her lap. When it was her turn, she stood, walked to the podium, and opened the notebook. Her voice was calm, not rehearsed. Just true. I'm not here to say Marcus is perfect. I'm here to say he's different. He told me the truth when it hurt. He never asked me to pretend he didn't do wrong. But he showed me that people can grow new parts of themselves if someone gives them space to try. I'm only 6, but I know this. If you lock up someone forever for what they used to be, you might miss who they're becoming. Silence filled the room. The board members didn't clap. They didn't smile. But one of them, a gray-haired woman with tired hands, nodded just once. 3 weeks later, Marcus was granted parole, not because of Anna, but because someone finally listened to him through her. Anna never met Marcus in person. He moved to New Mexico to live with his sister and rebuild quietly. But he sent her a gift, a handcrafted notebook made of reclaimed wood. Inside the cover, he had carved the words, "Still Becoming." Anna added it to her growing shelf of notebooks, not with fanfare, not with ceremony, just reverence, because some notebooks don't just hold words, they hold redemption. By late autumn, the listening room movement had reached over 24 states. It was no longer just a project or an idea, it was a quiet revolution, reshaping how children were heard, how healing was offered, and how truth was held gently instead of judged. But not everyone welcomed change with open arms. In the town of Springfield, Missouri, a place nestled in rolling hills and brimming with old traditions, a new listening room had opened inside a renovated library annex. The idea had come from a retired school counselor named Mr. Henry Kemp, a soft-spoken man who had seen one too many children fall through the cracks. He'd read about Anna in the New York Times and thought, why not here too? The room was modest blue walls, wide windows, shelves filled with colored notebooks, and a large banner above the doorway. Every voice matters, especially yours. But just days after opening, the trouble started. It began with a post on a local community forum. What kind of nonsense are we teaching our kids now? Feelings over facts? Truth from a 6-year-old? The world's gone soft. Then came the flyers. Anonymous pamphlets slid under doors and car windshields. Stop the indoctrination. Say no to the listening room agenda. Grace saw the online noise before the media did. She'd learned by now to track the whispers before they became storms. She called Mr. Kemp to check in. "They're nervous," he said calmly. "It's not you, Anna. It's change. And Springfield's not good with change." Anna overheard the call. She sat quietly on the floor, flipping through her brown notebook. After Grace hung up, she spoke. "Do they think feelings are dangerous?" Grace crouched beside her. "Some people think if they ignore feelings, they can control what's real. But the truth doesn't wait for permission." Anna nodded. Then she wrote in her notebook, "Truth without kindness becomes noise. Kindness without truth becomes silence. We need both, or we get storms." 2 days later, Springfield School Board held an emergency meeting to vote on whether to suspend all activities related to the listening room project. The boardroom was packed parents, teachers, news crews, even a few children clinging to the legs of their nervous mothers. James was already there, seated near the back, stone-faced and silent. He'd flown in that morning with Grace and Anna at his side. Not as a businessman, not even as a donor, but as someone who had learned, slowly and painfully, that sometimes the biggest voices came in the smallest bodies. The board chair, a woman named Carol Densby, called the meeting to order. "We are not here to silence children," she began. "But we are here to ensure that schools do not become places where ideology replaces education." A murmur rippled through the room. Then came a long line of speakers. Some parents denounced the listening room outright, calling it emotional manipulation or liberal propaganda. A father in a camouflage jacket shouted, "My boy doesn't need a rainbow-colored diary to grow a spine. He needs math and discipline." Others defended the space passionately. A 4th-grade teacher, tears in her eyes, said, "I had 3 kids this year admit to wanting to hurt themselves. Not because of the listening room, but because they didn't have one before." Finally, Grace stepped forward. She didn't bring notes. "My name is Grace Williams," she began, "and my daughter started something she never meant to turn into a movement. She just wanted to be heard. That's all any of us want, really." She paused. "When I was little, my mama used to say, if you lock a pot of boiling water and never let the steam out, don't be surprised when it explodes. That's what we've done to our children. We've locked their emotions behind performance charts and fear. But the listening room? That's the steam valve. It's the safety. It's not a threat to education. It's a promise of it." When she finished, the room was quiet. Until a slow clap started. Then another. And another. But not everyone clapped. The board took a recess. Anna sat outside on the stone steps, knees tucked to her chest. She was drawing again, not in the brown notebook this time, but in the gray one, which she had reopened just that morning. Grace sat beside her. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "A bridge," Anna said softly. "It's not finished. The 2 sides aren't touching yet." Grace looked down and nodded. "That's how it feels, doesn't it?" "Yeah," Anna replied. "But bridges take time." When the board reconvened, the vote was called. It passed barely, 4-3 in favor of keeping the listening room open, at least through the school year. Cheers erupted. Even some who had opposed it nodded quietly, as if somewhere, deep down, a wall had cracked. That evening, Mr. Kemp emailed Grace with a photo, the Springfield listening room, lit by soft lamps, filled with children writing again. On the wall, someone had taped Anna's drawing of the unfinished bridge. Beneath it, a note in a child's handwriting. "We'll meet in the middle. Meso." Later that week, Anna and Grace returned home to New York. The air had turned colder. Leaves blew in golden spirals across the sidewalk. Anna slipped her gray notebook onto the shelf again. Then she picked up a green one, still untouched. She opened it, stared at the first page. What should this one be? She whispered. Grace smiled, brushing Anna's hair behind her ear. Hope, she said. Green's always been the color of hope. Anna wrote. Hope isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that says, let's try again tomorrow. She closed the notebook. Outside, the wind carried the last of autumn's leaves into the darkening sky. But inside their little apartment, the notebooks stood side by side, bright, weathered, and full of voices. The storm in Springfield had passed, but the winds of change were still blowing. It began with a phone call that came just after dinner. When the sky had folded itself into deep navy and the apartment windows reflected more lamplight than stars. Grace answered, thinking it might be James or perhaps another principal reaching out. But the voice on the other end wasn't familiar. Miss Williams? This is Alana Park. I'm calling from the Department of Youth Affairs in Washington, D.C. Oh, Grace stood a little straighter, instinctively motioning for Anna to lower the volume on the television. Yes, this is Grace. We've been reviewing the impact of the Listening Room Initiative, and, well, it's garnered attention from the Senate Education Committee. There's going to be a hearing next month on youth mental health access and education reform. Grace's breath caught. She could already feel where this was going. And, Alana continued, we were hoping Anna could speak. Speak? Grace echoed. Yes, just 5 minutes. Nothing scripted. We want her voice, not a performance. The committee believes hearing directly from her could change minds that data hasn't. Grace looked over at Anna, who was now sitting cross-legged on the couch, flipping through the green notebook, humming softly. She's 6, Grace said gently. Yes, ma'am. That's why it matters. The hearing was set for the second Tuesday of the month in a large white building where change often entered quietly, if at all. Grace and Anna arrived 2 days early, staying in a modest hotel just outside the Capitol. James met them there, along with a retired speech therapist who offered to help Anna prepare, though Anna politely declined. I don't want to practice, she said. I just want to feel. In the days leading up to the hearing, national media picked up the story. Headlines flickered across screens and newspaper stands. Little girl with big words heads to Congress. Can a 6-year-old change the system? The listening room goes to Washington. Opinion columns were split. Some praised Anna's courage, calling her a voice untouched by bureaucracy. Others criticized the decision as theatrical and irresponsible. But Anna remained unfazed. She wasn't doing it for praise or protest. She was doing it for the children whose notebooks hadn't yet been read. The hearing room was larger than she imagined. It smelled like old paper and polished wood. There were microphones at every seat and an air of restrained formality that made even the coffee seem stiff. Senators filed in, dressed in dark suits and determined expressions. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras poised. When Anna was called forward, Grace walked with her to the long table. James sat in the second row, his hands clasped tightly. Anna climbed onto the seat with quiet confidence. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the senators. And then, she said nothing. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute passed. People shifted, whispered. Senator Langston, an older man with a thick southern drawl, leaned into his microphone. Miss Whitmore, is everything all right? Anna looked up. Her voice was soft but clear. Sometimes the best way to listen is to wait. I wanted to see who would get uncomfortable first. A ripple moved through the room. Grace felt her chest tighten with pride. Anna opened her green notebook. You asked me to talk about feelings, but I can't carry everyone's. So I brought theirs. She reached into her backpack and pulled out envelopes. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. She began opening them, one by one, reading snippets. I'm scared to go home after school. I haven't told anyone I miss my dad. My teacher thinks I'm stupid because I don't speak fast. I wrote this so I wouldn't cry again in class. Oh, she didn't cry. Not once. She read them like they were facts, not sob stories. Just truths the world hadn't paused long enough to hear. Senator Langston removed his glasses. Another senator wiped her eye discreetly. Anna closed the last envelope and looked up. I don't think adults mean to forget us. I think you're just really busy. But if someone's always too busy to listen, eventually we stop talking. She paused, then added, and sometimes, the quietest kids are the ones who need you most. The room sat in stunned silence. Then one by one people stood, not applauding, just standing, reverent, listening. That evening, the footage of Anna's testimony went viral. Not because of tears or theatrics, but because of stillness. Because of the silence she allowed to stretch and hold truth inside it. The hashtag number "Listen Like Anna" trended for days, but more than that, calls began flooding the Department of Education from school districts, nonprofits, and even juvenile justice centers. Everyone wanted a listening room, and in homes across the country, parents began pulling out old journals, setting out fresh paper, and asking their children, quietly, "Do you want to tell me something?" A week later, back in New York, Grace stood in their living room sorting mail when she noticed a small brown envelope, hand-delivered. No postage, just a name scrawled in pencil, "To Anna," from someone who finally listened. Inside was a note and a photograph. The photo showed a group of 6 children in a detention center classroom, each holding up a notebook of a different color. The note read, "They stopped fighting. They started writing. Thank you for making space for our noise. Mr. Reyes, Youth Correctional Center of Baton Rouge." Anna placed the photo into the back of her green notebook, then looked at Grace. "Can we go visit them one day?" "We will," Grace said. "We'll visit them all." Anna smiled. "Good. Because I think the next notebook's going to be really big." "What color?" Grace asked. Anna didn't hesitate. "Gold," she said, "for all the voices we haven't met yet." And just like that, the next chapter began. Not with a scream or a headline, but with a whisper, and the world, once again, leaned in to hear. The gold notebook sat on the table for a full day before anyone touched it. Its cover shimmered faintly in the morning light like a promise not yet spoken. Unlike the others, Anna hadn't named this one right away. She simply placed a single gold thread inside it, thin, delicate, almost invisible to the casual eye. But to Anna, it meant something deeper, connection. That Sunday, Grace brewed coffee while the radio played soft jazz in the background. Anna sat by the window, staring out at the people walking their dogs, chatting over bagels, or heading to church in their Sunday best. The world looked ordinary, but inside her, something was shifting. "Do you ever feel," Anna asked quietly, "like your heart is bigger than your body?" Grace smiled, placing a hand on her daughter's head. "Every day since I became your mom," Anna tapped the gold notebook. "I think this one's for the future, for the things we hope, not just the things we've lived." Later that day, James arrived with news. Big news. "We've been approached by the Smithsonian," he said, clearly trying to maintain composure. "They want to feature the Listening Room project. A full exhibit. The notebooks, the letters, the drawings, the whole movement." Grace nearly dropped her mug. "The Smithsonian?" "They said it's not just history in the making," James added. "It's heart in the making." "Oh." Anna didn't speak right away. She looked at the brown, gray, green, and red notebooks lined neatly on the shelf, then at the gold one in her lap. "Only if we include the quiet ones," she said. "The ones who didn't get to finish their pages." James nodded, his voice softer now. "We'll include everyone, Anna." The months that followed were a whirlwind of coordination. Museum curators visited their home. Audio engineers recorded children reading excerpts from their own notebooks. Artists were commissioned to turn drawings into immersive installations. One section of the exhibit would replicate the original listening room, with soft bean bags, colored pencils, and real notebooks where visitors could write their own truths. As word spread, people across the country began sending in notebooks of their own. Some were from adults who'd never had the chance to speak as children. Others were from parents, apologizing for the times they hadn't listened. One man sent a 3-ring binder titled, "Letters to the Son I Never Knew How to Hold." Inside were unsent letters to his estranged child, written every year on their birthday. It was placed in the exhibit's Unfinished Conversations section, and through it all, Anna continued writing. In the gold notebook, she wrote messages not just to the world but to the future. "Dear kid who feels invisible, you're not a ghost. You're a lantern. You just haven't been lit yet." She titled that page "For Tomorrow." Opening day of the exhibit arrived in spring. The sun shone just enough to make the banners sparkle as crowds lined up outside the museum's east wing. Grace held Anna's hand tightly as they approached the glass doors, behind which years of silence, pain, and hope had been turned into something sacred. Reporters tried to swarm, but Anna kept walking, her sunflower pin fastened proudly to her chest. Inside, the air felt hushed, not out of formality, but respect. Visitors walked slowly, reading pages, pausing by drawings, listening to the whispers in the audio corners. No one rushed. Everyone listened. In the center of the exhibit stood a glass case housing the very first red notebook, the one from the day Anna translated the Billionaire's contract. Next to it sat the gray one, and a small placard that read, "When the world feels too loud or too quiet, find the page that speaks for you, then add your own." Anna Whitmore, age 6. As they reached the final room, Anna noticed something that wasn't in the plans. A wall, blank, white, empty. James saw her confusion and smiled. "We left this one for them." Anna tilted her head. "Them?" He pointed to the crowd slowly entering. Parents, grandparents, teens, veterans, teachers, survivors. They get to write now. There were markers, post-it notes, even paints. Slowly, the wall began to fill quotes, doodles, confessions, dreams. A man in a wheelchair wrote, "I haven't spoken to my brother in 30 years. I will tonight." A teenage girl wrote, "I am not broken, just bent." A woman placed a photo of her late son, captioned, "He needed a page. I didn't know how to give it to him." Anna stood in front of it all, tears filling her eyes, not from sadness but recognition. These weren't her words. They were ours. And then she added her own. "The listening room never closed. It just moved into you." That night, back in their quiet apartment, Anna asked Grace a question. "Do you think it's done?" Grace, tucking her into bed, thought for a long moment. "No," she said softly. "I think it's just changed shape." Anna turned toward the window, where the city lights twinkled like notebook stars waiting to be opened. "I think I want to make one more." Grace smiled. "What color?" Anna thought, and then whispered, "Clear, so anyone can see themselves in it." She drifted off before Grace could answer. And so, the story that began with a contract and a cruel laugh, that bent and broke and healed across states, prisons, courtrooms, and classrooms, finally came full circle. Not with applause, not with glory, but with a wall full of whispers, a notebook no one could see but everyone could feel, and a little girl, now 7, who taught the world that listening wasn't about being silent. It was about showing up, page after page, heart after heart, so others would too. The end, and the beginning. The story of Anna teaches us that true change often begins with the quietest voices. It reminds us that listening deep, compassionate listening, is a form of justice, especially for those who've long been ignored. Through courage, kindness, and the power of words, even a 6-year-old can inspire a nation to heal. The greatest lesson is this: you don't need a loud voice to be heard, you need a true one.